If we can't do this, I think we have a big expensive pile of scrap here. So this one's gonna be pretty important. Hey drivers, if you've been following along on the shorts we've been posting recently, you saw this saw, we picked it up, got it home, got it off the trailer without any catastrophes, and even got the thing to run on 3-phase power. All that's great, but we have a huge problem. It's missing a part. This thing has a Veri-speed function to it that we're just kind of starting to figure out right now. And there's a part that goes here with a hand wheel that allows you to adjust the speed of the unit. This is supposed to turn really slow, like double-digit RPMs, not thousands of revolutions per minute. Part of that is just the nature of the saw. Part of that is this giant blade. This is like a 14-inch blade here. And it's just running too fast. Right now it's running wide open. So let's take this apart, see if we can figure out how the Veri-speed works, and then we might have an idea on how we can make something that goes here to slow this saw down. It'd be great to retain the full Veri-speed function. I think it's going to be continuously variable if it's correct. I'd just be satisfied to slow it down to something usable, even if we don't get the Veri-speed function back. So let's see what we can do. This is keyed to the shaft that this pulley is on, but this is kind of an idler dealy-do. I think this might act kind of like a throwout bearing where it needs to spin relative to this, but it stays put and it gives us something to push on. See, this is how they do the Veri-speed. This flat belt normally rides on its edge. So this is really the belt surface here, I think. You can kind of see the wear marks here. It looks like this squeezes together, so if we push here, I think this part's going to slide this direction, making the pulley thinner and causing this belt to ride up the edge. And it's not going to go very far, maybe 3/4 of an inch or so, but that means this side would get really big and the thing would turn slower. So that means that this one has to get skinnier. It may respond, it may be kind of a spring-loaded thing. I guess the spring would be in here pushing that way. And so as the tension on this belt gets greater, I imagine it pushes the pulley apart so that this side goes this direction and allows the belt to fall down into it. All right, not only is that one getting bigger, but this one's getting skinnier, serving to slow things down. So I think this side's gonna take care of itself. All right, how are we gonna push against that? This hole has threads in it, and they're really, really coarse. That tells me that the adjustment was made pretty quickly, like it would move a long way with each rotation. So it must not be that much tension. The hole has a major dimension of about 20 millimeters, so that's an M20. Everything on this saw is metric. Minor dimension of around 18 millimeters. Now an M20 would usually have a pitch of about 2.5, meaning each thread is 2.5 millimeters apart. This is about 4 millimeters. So that is super duper coarse. That's a problem. There is no way we're gonna find an M20 bolt with about a 4 millimeter thread. We'd have to make it ourselves. Well, we actually could. I think I have the metric gears for this lathe in a box somewhere. And we could dial in a 4 millimeter pitch. That would require some skill building on my part and a little bit more time than I think we have. So let's push forward and see if we can come up with something with what's laying around. I've dug up a piece of steel that kind of sort of fits the dimensions and a piece of aluminum. Let's start with the aluminum because that's going to be a whole lot easier to work with. Here's the idea. We'll cut this pipe to length, make sure it's square on the lathe, and then our piece will line up something like this. We'll need to have a backer on it, and it'll have to have a hole drilled through it for a pretty good sized bolt. Head of that bolt will be inside facing out this way, and we'll use a nut, like a lock nut or something, to tighten it in place here so it's kind of like a stud sticking out. There may be a clearance issue behind here against this part, so we might face off the head of the bolt in the lathe. But once we're situated there, this piece, which will be much shorter at that time, will slide over this stud. We'll have to notch out clearance for this and this. It'll reach past all of that, something like this, and push on our idler throwout thingy thing. So if we're right about any of this, tightening a nut on the end of that stud will end up making this pulley a little bit thinner. This is going to be interesting. Let's get started. The tubing has been squared off in the lathe, so we have a nice flat and square surface to be pushing on the throwout bearing dealy-do. Now I need to notch out the sides of it deep enough that it'll end up with those two fingers to kind of reach down in there through these two windows here to push here and here against this thing. I've marked where the gaps are and the parts that I need to cut out. We'll go about 2 3/8 inch deep. This adjustment strikes me as the kind of thing that needs to be done while the motor is running so that we don't crimp that little belt that's in there. So as I tighten this, and if it works, it'll be squeezing that pulley together and the belt will just ride up the side of it over many revolutions. And I don't know, let's just see if it works. This is good news. This is working. I don't know how far I can go. I could probably go too far. I mean, I took some measurements, I'm in the ballpark, but I could go too far and push the belt out the top of the pulley, and that would be bad. So I don't know if this is gonna work, but what I'm gonna try and do is pull the cover off. That means that we'll be removing the tension from the thingy thing. It may pop out and the belt slide down, but I just like to see where the belt is where I am now. This looks good to me. It looks like I still have quite a bit further that I can go to slow this thing down even more. Also, back here, this responded. The belt was out here, right? So as it got tight, it pushed down into the V, and some, I guess, spring-loaded thing back here got pushed out by that. So this belt is widening while that one up there is getting skinnier, just as we expected. This is probably super common, but this is really my first go around with something like this, and it's pretty cool. Assuming this hasn't moved out at all, I have about a 1/4 inch further in that I can go. That would be measured from the edge of the belt basically to the top of the pulley. As this gets skinnier by another 1/4 inch, that'll put the belt riding right at the top of this pulley. So I think I'm gonna make that my stop. So I'll cut another 1/4 inch out of here, and that way when this thing is all the way in, we should be at the slowest speed. Let's try that. Okay, this is a big win. We have Veri-speed. The saw, I think, is going to work. Still have a number of issues to deal with. The blade, complete garbage. One's already on the way. Not cheap, but it's on the way. Need to deal with the coolant pump. There should always be coolant going here, and that's going to be a project unto itself, and I need to find whatever coolant works with this sort of thing. But big step forward on the beast saw today. Okay, next thing. We're going to take a look at those busted bolts on the motor mount. I have it rigged up here to a bar in the ceiling, and instead of hoisting it up, I can just lower the rest of this module, right? So we'll take those bolts off on the other side, move over here really fast, and if my imagination holds up, this will work. This will stay here, this will go down and expose the bolt holes on the other side where we need to get those busted off bolts out. Like this one busted off before the respray. See, it's not a very good respray. And this one after. Now this is one of those things that could go easy, or it could be really, really messy. I'm guessing it's going to be messy. Let's see. I'll take it. Hopefully the next one goes like that. That's great. Ta-da! These little dilly-doos are nice to have around. They're pitch gauges. This is a 10 millimeter or an M10, and the coarse thread has a 1.5 pitch to it. This is a match. This is probably a 3/16 thread. It almost matches. Enough to force it, which I think is what somebody did. So we're going to take this thread chaser and clean up those threads just for funsies. Here's the 16. Sure enough, somebody put a standard bolt in a metric threaded hole. Not a good way to take care of your stuff. So, got these. These will go in. They're proper M10 1.5 pitch. And we'll be all set.